Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Schlyde into Sports. Today, we're going to be talking about college football, specifically college pick'em results, another USC bashing, rankings, and what is going on with Michigan, because the scandal just seems to get worse by the day, so we kind of have to talk about it. We're also going to dabble a little into swimming today as well, talking about the rankings of the teams and why this year is different for college swimming than most years. The day I'm recording this is Halloween, so happy Halloween to everyone. I'm wearing my costume for today, which is Joe Burrow, and I'm happy to say I did not let any of you guys down in fantasy if you were my fantasy owners, so you're welcome. To start today, I would like to announce that I went 9-1 for college pick'em last week, which is a personal best for me. I don't think I've ever done better than like 7-3, so that was awesome. It's one step closer to me getting into sports betting. The only game that I got wrong was the Ohio versus Miami-Ohio game. Miami-Ohio came out, and they won big time against Ohio. This week for college pick'em, we have another great slate of games: Notre Dame versus Clemson, Ole Miss versus Texas A&M, and more. The first game that's on the list of the pick'em is Ole Miss versus A&M. This is at Ole Miss, and they're on a winning streak right now, and their offense is just absolutely insane. So I think that Ole Miss is most likely going to win this one. However, A&M did do better against Alabama than Ole Miss did, even though both of them did lose. But Texas A&M held Bama to a much closer score. I think I'm still going to go with Ole Miss, though, because A&M doesn't really have a great history of playing on the road. The past few years, they've been known to choke on the road, and Ole Miss's offense is it's very fast-paced, and I just don't think, come second half of the game, that A&M's going to be able to keep up with it. So give me Ole Miss. Second game is Notre Dame versus Clemson. This is a classic rematch against two historic programs. Clemson is on a 2-game losing streak, while Notre Dame has been on a dominating run since their loss against Louisville. They held Pitt, a team that had beat Louisville last week, to just 7 points while scoring 58 against them. So they literally won by 50. They're really trying to make themselves a case to still be in the playoffs, even though they've lost twice already. Stat-wise, Clemson and Notre Dame are pretty even on both sides of the ball, but the way the Irish have been playing and the way Clemson has been playing as of late, I'm going to say the Irish are going to take this one, even though it's at Clemson. Third game is Texas versus Kansas State. This is a Big 12 conference matchup between two solid teams. I think this is going to be a more even match than people realize because Texas doesn't have Quinn Ewers, their QB1, since he injured his shoulder. However, they still played well last week in a dominating win over BYU and held them to 7 points. And this is a statement win that shows that it really shows the QB depth of Texas, and that even though their QB1's out, they're still like a championship contending team. These two teams are also neck and neck with each other in the Big 12 conference standings. So you best believe this is going to be a close scoring game with these two high-powered offenses in operation. This game is at Texas, though, and I feel like Texas has a lot more to lose in this game than Kansas State does, since Kansas State already has lost 2 games, and their chances of making the playoff are slim to none. Whereas Texas has lost 1 game, they could still win the conference championship and still sneak into the playoffs. So I'm going to take the Longhorns in this game, but I am putting this on upset alert, so don't be too surprised if Kansas State squeaks out a win. Next game is Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State. It's another Big 12 conference matchup, although after next year it won't be a Big 12 conference matchup. These opponents are also neck and neck in the Big 12 conference standings. I think this matchup is a little more even than is being shown by the current votes in the game and the win probability. The Cowboys of Oklahoma State could very well shock the Sooners in this matchup. And I say that because the Sooners, they just lost to Kansas. And even before that, they were looking a little shaky. So it's entirely possible that the Cowboys could come through and get the win. OSU has also been on an upward trajectory with their points. They've been scoring more points per game, while Oklahoma's been scoring less points per game. So I'm going to pick Oklahoma State. I like the momentum that they have right now. And I think since it's a rivalry game and it's at Oklahoma State, it's all just kind of leaning into Oklahoma State's favor. Next game is JMU versus Georgia State. JMU just squeaked out a win against ODU. Georgia State just got crushed by Georgia Southern in their last games. Currently, JMU is ranked. They are still undefeated, and they need to stay winning to keep moving up. I think if they win this game, they could maybe squeak into the top 20. They have to stay winning, just like teams like Air Force. Like Air Force is not in the. It's not one of like the big conference teams. Like they're not an ACC team. They're not Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12. They're not in that Power 4. So teams like JMU and Air Force need to stay winning in order to have any kind of shot at the final playoffs. JMU has been fairly consistent this year with their play, so I think I'm going to take JMU over Georgia State. Next game is Kansas versus Iowa State. Both of these teams are coming off big in-conference wins. The Jayhawks upset the Sooners, and the Cyclones coming off a dominating win over Baylor last week. Iowa State has not been very consistent. At the beginning of the year, they lost to Ohio, who just lost to Miami of Ohio. But they have also had some big wins. But I think after that Oklahoma-Kansas game, Kansas has shown that, and also Kansas-Texas game, Kansas has shown that they can contend and even beat top 10 teams. So I'm going to go with the Jayhawks in this game. I think it could be close, though, since it is at Iowa State. But I think Kansas will come out with the win here. Next game is USC-Washington. All right, here comes the USC bashing. You all knew this was coming. USC barely beat a Cal team at home and allowed them to score 49 points, which shows that their defense is not, it just was not there that game. And Cal was trying to go for the 2-point conversion, so that's the only reason why that didn't go to overtime. If Cal had went for that, just the kick, the end, it would have been 50-50, and they could have come out with the win in overtime, but they tried to put it away, and it didn't end well in their favor. And also, during the 2-point conversion, I did see holding from USC, which, of course, the officials didn't call. And it's partially because it's 2-point conversion. They just won't let the players play. But still, like, that had detrimental impact on the game where Cal could have upset USC. But I don't think they wanted that to happen, so I think that's why they didn't make that call. I know Washington hasn't really played that well their past couple games against Arizona State and Stanford, but I think Washington has been more preparing for the back end of their schedule. Like USC is that first game in the back end of the schedule, and USC is still ranked. So I think if Washington just absolutely crushes USC, like I think they will, then Washington will move up more in they'll have a better presence in the rankings, because right now they're kind of seen as weak, like a weak top 5 team, kind of like Florida State was at the beginning of the year, because Florida State had that close win against Boston College, and people were starting to doubt them, and now Florida State is starting to dominate their opponents towards the back end of their schedule, and like Washington, their back end is tougher than their front end. So give me Washington for this game, and Washington is also statistically better on both ends of the ball. So I think everything is in Washington's favor, minus the location, but I don't think that's going to make a difference for them. Next game is LSU versus Bama. This is a big SEC in-conference matchup. Both teams coming off great wins before their bye weeks. So both of these teams are going in with 2 weeks of preparation for this game. LSU just got a win a couple weeks ago, shutting out Army by a lot. And Bama got a great road win against Tennessee. Lots of people are picking Bama. I mean, Bama had a very rocky start this year, so I'm still not entirely sure if I want to pick them. But last year also, this game happened and LSU squeaked out that win. So I think just like with the LSU-Florida State game, it could be a repeat year where LSU gets the win. It'll definitely be tough. LSU, since their loss against Ole Miss, has scored 48 or more points in their games, whereas Bama hasn't really scored that nearly as much as LSU in their games. But I think Bama's more of a defensive focused team right now. Something that shouldn't be taken lightly is LSU's high scoring games as of late. I think LSU does it again against Bama and spoils their season because Alabama right now is in the top 10, so they have a lot more to lose. But LSU could, just because it's a SEC rivalry game, LSU might just want to spoil Bama's season and keep them from the playoffs. Second to last game is Miami versus North Carolina State. Here's an in-conference ACC game. Both of these teams have played Clemson very recently, and they both won. Miami had to take it to overtime, but they still came out on top. Neither of these teams have been the most consistent, though. Miami lost to Georgia Tech in a stunner. Miami should not have lost that game, but they just made a tactical error and not kneeling the ball. And NC State has been losing to top 25 opponents. They lost to Louisville, Notre Dame, and Duke, respectively. The Miami offense does look very impressive, though. They put up an average of 456 yards per game, which is a lot. Their defense is also slightly better than North Carolina State's. I'm going to take Miami. I think they grab a close road game to add to their resume to maybe squeak into the top 25 again. And the final game, UCLA and Arizona. So I did say last week that Arizona could stun Oregon State. They got it done in the end. UCLA is also coming off a great win against Colorado, though. And it's a Pac-12 rivalry game. The rivalry between Arizona and UCLA, it's mostly rooted in basketball, but the schools' rivalry is still very deep. So lots of people are going to show out at this game, you best believe. And Oregon State also beat UCLA. So if UCLA wants to make itself a case to move up in the rankings, if they beat Arizona, then it'll be almost like they beat Oregon State. UCLA hasn't really done that well on the road, though, and this is at Arizona again. But the matchmaker predictor still has it almost at 50-50. They are giving UCLA the slight edge with 52.4% chance of winning, and Arizona having a 47.6% chance of winning. After watching Arizona play USC, I feel like this team is severely underrated this year. And I say this because the stats are on UCLA's side to win the game on both sides of the ball, but Arizona has the tougher strength of schedule. So I'm actually kind of impressed that the numbers are so close statistically. So I'm going to take the Wildcats again in this matchup. And I think they carry the magic from last week into this week and beat out UCLA and maybe squeak into the top 25. So in College Pick'em, there's also a tiebreaker. And most of the time that's how many points are scored combined between the teams. So you add up if it was Arizona versus UCLA, you'd add up Arizona's score, UCLA score, and that would give you the total points. So the tiebreaker is how many combined points will be scored in the LSU versus Bama game. And I bet both of these teams will get up to around 40. I think LSU will probably score just above 40, while Bama will probably score 37 or 38. My number is going to be 80. I'm guessing 82 points combined. I think 82 is a good number. 78 is a good number. 76 is a good number as well. All right, the AP poll this week, they have top 5 hasn't changed. Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, Washington. Oregon moves up to 6 after their almost a shutout win against Utah. Texas moves up to 7 after Oklahoma lost. So Oklahoma falls down a few spots and Texas jumps in. Bama moves up to 8. Penn State at 9. Oklahoma falls to 10. Ole Miss moves up to 11. Notre Dame moves up to 12. LSU 13. Missouri 14. Louisville goes up to 15. After that Duke win, Oregon State falls to 16. Air Force moves up to 17. Utah goes down to 18. Tennessee 19. UCLA goes to 20. And then you have Tulane at 21. Kansas at 22. So they jump back in after their win against Oklahoma. JMU goes to 23. USC goes to 24. And Kansas State goes to 25. But my poll, you'll see the graphic here in a couple seconds. But my poll, I have Florida State at 1 because of their win over Duke. They won by a lot, and I thought that was a really impressive win by them. So I have them in the top spot for this week. Ohio State at 2 because looking back at previous games when they play away at Wisconsin, they don't historically do all that well, but this is the best they've done in Wisconsin. So I thought that was a pretty good game by them. I have Georgia at 3. This is because they had that win over Florida, and there's a lot of questions about Georgia going into this game after their tight end got injured. And he's normally their big playmaker, so people weren't really sure if Georgia was going to, dominate Florida. But they still took care of business over there, won by more than 20 points. I have Washington at 4. They got the win against Stanford, but they looked a little sloppy. Michigan I have at 5. They had a bye week, so they didn't really get a chance to, show themselves. But I liked the way the other teams above them played last week, so I had to move them up. But Michigan this week they'll have their chance. Oregon I have at 6. They had a great win against Utah at Utah. I just like the above teams better. Washington also beat Oregon, so I can't really put Oregon above Washington still. And also, that win against Utah was really good for them because Utah rarely ever loses at home. They rarely lose at home. This is the first time in a while that they've lost at home. I have Texas at 7. Even without Ewers, they looked great against BYU. I still like the above teams better, though. I was thinking about maybe putting Texas at 6 and Oregon at 7, but I liked that Oregon win better. Penn State I have at 8. Close game against Indiana, which is shocking, I think, to everyone. But Penn State came through at the end. They got a turnover, capitalized on it. They got a safety, and then ended up winning by 9. Bama, I have at 9. They had a shaky start this year. They lost to Texas. They had a close game against Central Florida. But they've been winning consistently since then. Ole Miss I have at 10. They continue to take care of business like usual. Notre Dame I have at 11. They just absolutely dominated Pitt, who beat Louisville. So I have them above Louisville now. Oklahoma at 12. It was a shocking loss against Kansas. I thought that Oklahoma should have won that game, just going into it. But then after watching it, they didn't look that impressive. So I had to punish them a little bit more. Louisville I have at 13. They had a great win against Duke. They're trying to make a case for a top 4 spot. Since they only have one loss, it's looking like they're probably going to be facing Florida State for the ACC championship. And if Louisville wins, they're going to make a case, a very strong case at that, to be in the top 4 for the playoff, which would be huge, especially beating that Florida State team. LSU I have at 14. I just like the above teams better. LSU's offense is really good, but their defense is kind of holding them back. They're probably going to make a big jump, though. If they beat Bama in the way that they've been beating the other teams lately, LSU could make a case to be in my top 10, even though they've lost twice. Missouri I have at 15. Same deal as LSU. They could make a big jump if they somehow upset Georgia, that's going to be a huge game. I think also with the question still going in for Georgia, Missouri now was able to see how Georgia plays without their star tight end, so they might be able to have good prep and give Georgia a run for their money. It's unlikely, but possible. Georgia State I have at 16. They lost to Arizona, but I feel like they're better than the teams that are below them, so I kept them kind of up in the mid-teens. Utah I have at 17. They lost to a really strong Oregon team at home, but in bad enough fashion for me to move them down a little bit. I know, normally I don't punish the teams too bad if they lost to someone that's ranked above them, but In the fashion that Utah lost, I just had to move them down a little bit. UCLA, I have at 18. A little Pac-12 trio up in here. I like the above teams in the Pac-12 better, but I think UCLA is definitely better than the teams that are below them. Like, I don't think it's too close, except maybe for 19, which is Air Force. They continue to win against they continue to win as other teams lose. So the more they keep winning, the more they're probably going to move up, because as those top teams are starting to get into those tough in-conference matchups, they're going to start to fall down, which only leaves room for Air Force to slowly move their way up. They could maybe make a case for the top 10 this year if they just keep winning. I have Tennessee at 20. They beat Kentucky. Granted, it was at Kentucky, but it was closer than it should have been, in my opinion, so I only have them at 20. Duke, I have at 21. I didn't really want to punish them too bad against their loss against Louisville, because Louisville was ranked above them, and I think the AP had Louisville ranked a little bit too low, but I think they did that so that way it would be a close ranked matchup between Louisville and Duke, just because you had the number 18 and number 20 team facing off. So it just looked a little more even, but it really wasn't going to be that even. Kansas moves up to 22 after an impressive win against Oklahoma. JMU, I have at 23. They're still undefeated. Tulane, 24. That's kind of self-explanatory. And USC, I have at 25. And they look less and less impressive as the weeks go by. I almost actually booted them out of the rankings for Kansas State, but USA won their game, and a win is a win. But don't expect USC to be in the rankings next week after their game against Washington. So the Eagles, they played the Washington Commanders on Sunday, and the tush push got stopped, which is a good sign for the tush push, because since it can be stopped, it's more likely that it's not going to be banned in the NFL. But Washington didn't really stop it. It was more of a mistake on the Eagles' end because they accidentally dropped the ball, quite literally. Don't be too fooled by that Washington stop against the tush push. Now let's talk about this whole sign stealing thing. Let's just lay out a timeline here, because I feel like just as each day goes by, the timeline gets more and more confusing. So I'm going to try to lay this out the best that I can. It seems to get worse and worse as the day goes by, like pouring gasoline onto a fire. And, you just keep pouring it on, and the flame just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It went from going to future opponents' games and filming their signs to accusations of, one of the notable accusations that I saw online was that Michigan gave South Carolina the signs of Tennessee because they didn't want the Vols to play them in the playoffs, since at that time they were expected to be a top 4 contender. And at first, there were some coaches, towards the beginning of this, that did defend Michigan. And I did like some of their points, Coach Prime and Coach Rule. They jumped to the defense saying that, why the rules were in place and, kind of why they're a little irrelevant, I guess. Sign stealing, every team does. Coach Prime said that just because they steal your signs, you still have to stop, what they're going to do, It doesn't, Michigan could steal Ohio State signs, but Michigan still has to find a way to stop the play, right? You can't change that. And the analogy that Coach Prime said was that, in baseball, if you know a curveball's coming, and you're going to be able to know how to stop that. But in football, it's a little different. There's a lot more pieces involved. So it's a lot trickier to actually stop a play than they're making it seem. And Coach Rule, he pointed out that in high school, they have technology in the helmets where the players can hear what their coordinators and coaches are saying to them, so they can make plays that way. And it's the same thing in the NFL. You can do that too. They have stuff in the helmets where the players can just talk to they can just listen to what their coaches and coordinators are saying. In college, they don't have that because some of the smaller schools, they can't afford that technology in their helmets while other schools can. So they have it to where, unless all the colleges vote and get the helmets, then they're going to have to stick with signs, because that's the only way right now that they can communicate with the players effectively on the field. So today I would like to slide a little bit into swimming, and this is the last segment for today. Let's start off with the rankings. Top 10 of men and women right now. We're going to pull the rankings from the NCAA coaches poll. For the men, The top 10 teams are Auburn at 10. So we're starting at 10. Auburn at 10, Georgia 9, Stanford at 8. You've got Texas at 7, Tennessee at 6, Indiana at 5, NC State coming in at 4. Third is Florida, second is Cal, and rounding out the top 10, you have ASU, the Arizona State Sun Devils at number 1. And the top 10 teams for the women, starting at 10, is Stanford, 9 is Indiana, Florida and USC receive the same number of votes, so they are sharing the number 7 spot right now. Tennessee comes in at 6, Ohio State at 5, NC State 4, Louisville at 3, Texas comes in at 2, with Virginia at the top spot receiving the most votes. The coaches voting in the polls have a little bit of a challenge this year, and this is kind of going into what I wanted to talk about at the beginning with why swimming is so different this year than it is most years. Because this year is leading into the Olympics, which are this summer in 2024. So some of the meets that the swimmers are participating in are in long course meters. And it's really hard to judge a swimmer based, because the NCAA championship is going to be in yards, right? So you have to somehow figure out a way to convert meters and yards for every single swimmer, because every single swimmer swims differently in meters and yards. Like, some people are better in meters than they are in yards, and vice versa. So just judging it based on times and time conversions is still going to be a difficult thing to do. The reason why they're doing it in meters is because you have swimmers that are trying to get Olympic trials cuts for their respective countries. So like people that live in the US are trying to get the US trial cuts. People who live in Germany are trying to get the German trial cuts. Or they're trying to get times that'll put them in a spot they want to be at their trials. Like if they want to be a certain seed or if they want to go in with a certain time. Thank you all for sliding in this week. There will be a stream this Saturday, November 4th. It will start when the first college football game starts, which I think is at noon, and will end when the last college football game ends. So that'll probably be like 3 a.m, naturally. There will be some breaks in between, like where I'll get they'll break for a meal or get water or whatever. But it'll be a long stream, and you can join whenever you want and ask whatever questions you want about what is going on in sports or about my photo editing. I post my photo edits to ryan.schleyer_photoedits_. If you want to check out the edits that I have previously worked on, all the socials for the podcast are Schlyde_into_sports. The Insta, the Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube that's all of them. I'm starting to be a little more active on Twitter, reacting to stuff live when I can, and I will be posting more graphics like the one I made on the Twitter and Instagram respectively. I hope to see you all on the stream Saturday, and have a great weekend.
Bye.